Speaker, and in the spirit of full disclosure, I'd like to tell everyone that I would personally benefit from this act because I own a Polaris Ranger 500 side by side. Woo! So, spirit of full disclosure. But for those who are wondering what this amendment is and actually why this act is so important, this change is so important for the people of rural Ontario, I'd like to go a little bit back in history. In 2003, legislation was passed in this House to allow ATVs to go on trails, to go on the shoulders of certain highways, not the 400 series, and secondary roads. And that was passed through a lot of work, but a lot of this vehicle had evolved from go-karts, from three-wheelers, to a safe vehicle that had become a part of rural society. And that change in 2003 made a huge difference to people in Northern Ontario and all rural Ontario. It made a huge change because they'd been using these vehicles and now they could actually use them for their work, for their leisure. A lot of people go to work on ATVs. Actually, in my neighborhood, a lot of kids go to their part-time job, on ATV. It's a lot. There is no public transportation where I'm from. In a lot of places in rural Ontario, there is no public transportation. So in many cases, the ATV is a lot cheaper than having to find a second car for your 16-year-old to go to the part-time job. Makes a huge difference. So over the years, the ATV evolved. Like everything else, it evolved. And now, more people use UTVs than ATVs. And a UTV, the difference is you can have more passengers on a UTV. An ATV can only have one passenger legally. An ATV, you have to straddle the gas tank, and you have to have handlebars. And a UTV usually has a bench seat and a steering wheel. It's like for more people, it's a four-wheel drive golf cart, for lack of a better word. It's an all-terrain golf cart. And more people use these. And they basically do the same job as an ATV. The big difference is, as our population gets older, and the same thing that's happening in rural Ontario as in the rest of Ontario, it's easier to use a UTV than an ATV. You don't have to straddle the gas tank. You can use a steering wheel. It's much easier to learn how to drive a UTV. The problem is, the legislation governing these vehicles hasn't evolved along with the vehicle. That's the problem, Mr. Speaker. And rural Ontarians have been pushing for a long time. And not just, my colleague from Algoma, Manitoulin has been pushing for this. My colleague from Parry Sound, Muskoka, been pushing for this. Nickel Belt, my colleague, all my rural colleagues from all parties have been pushing for this. And we thought we'd reached a pinnacle where we were going to be successful when the member from Glengarry Prescott from the government side, on November 7th, 2013, we all supported his resolution to change the regulations so that UTVs would be allowed, UTVs and users of UTVs would be allowed the same regulations as the users of ATVs. And a lot of people thought that we'd reached it. Imagine our surprise when here we're now in 2015 and nothing has changed. Despite, but imagine the surprise from people who still actually had faith in the government at that time. Because this isn't costly, this isn't groundbreaking, this is basically a recognition of the needs of the people of rural Ontario. That's what this is. That needs to be done. And something that I've heard a couple times, I'd like to close with this. That we have to be careful because when we allow these machines, we're going to have all kinds of new traffic problems. And well, ATVs have been legal for a decade, for longer than a decade. And by far and large, the users have been responsible. The people across rural Ontario have been very responsible. They've taken the privilege of having to use ATVs on roads very seriously. And these same people are now asking for the right to use UTVs, and there is no reason to believe that they would take this right any less seriously. This case is strictly about respecting the needs of people of rural Ontario. It's an issue. I get more calls and more petitions, as do my colleagues, on this issue than on almost any other issue. And I'll give you an example, okay? We have lots of snow in Northern Ontario, right? So in my riding, but give me a second. In my riding, someone put a blade on the front of the UTV to clean snow. Everyone has these, okay? He was charged. You cannot use a UTV on a street. So technically, cleaning snow out of your laneway, backing onto the street, is illegal. You can do it with an ATV, you can do it with a tractor, you can do it with a four-wheel drive pickup, but you can't do it with a UTV. Now, by far, the majority of police officers are very understanding, and they look the other way, right? But at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, you are breaking the law. It's time that changes. This government has the full power to act. They could do it. They may not be able to do it this afternoon, but they could do it on Monday. We need to change it so law-respecting, law-abiding people in rural Ontario can use these things without being forced to break the law. Thank you, Speaker.